Hello and welcome to Manny Biel, and welcome to yet another deconstruction of philosophy, online philosophy. I mentioned after deciding to quit the lengthy deconstruction of Keith Frankish lecture series yesterday, or in the last part, that I might head into another lecture series by a guy called Timothy Bayne from the same place, Moscow Center for Consciousness Studies, about the problems of other minds. And I was saying that I might wait a little while before I head into it. On the other hand, I would actually like to get going with it, just to sort of get it while I'm in sort of this kind of deconstruction mode, you could say, right? Just at least get it started, and then maybe let's see how in the Christmas time here I have some time off, and I might actually want to have something to do, right? In my make it one or two maybe a day or something, like who knows, to just keep myself busy with philosophy, because it's just like there's certain things I can't live without. I can't live without my morning bath. I can't live without my morning coffee, and I can't live without philosophy, right? So it's like uh, I feel like it is almost, and it's kind of weird. It is almost worrying to me, nearly almost, right? Not it's not worrying, but it's like I am, and it's actually incredible because I am personally I'm a bit of a um, what's the term? Impulsive talk, and to some extent I'm impulsive, at least in some aspects where I would like to be sometimes less impulsive. But there's also certain areas where I'm just going with it year after year after year after year. So I am sort of a complicated person in this regard, right? There are certain things I can get very hung up for a while, and then I sort of lose interest in it. And then there's something else, but I don't lose the interest in it because I'm bored with it, but I lose interest because there's something else that's more interesting, right? So I'm this the kid in the candy store kind of person, right? In some regard, at least, right? But philosophy, as soon as the penny dropped for me, like 10 plus years ago, right? It's been sort of a like food, right? I need philosophy. I need to do philosophy. I need to, you know, reflecting on philosophical stuff and so on, right? I simply can't live without it. There's no so I have to obey, right? It's not like I have to do it, 24/7 or anything like that. But it's like my mind has. It's like, yeah, in a way, you could see. I'm seeing it this way. My mind has been provoked after after decades of not doing philosophy, right? There are certain departments of my mind that has just been let loose, you could say, right? But they were compartmentalized somehow psychologically. I don't exactly um, think it's sort of a psychological thing, but to some extent it is, right? That there's certain I can remember that notion that there's certain aspects that's like, okay, this is not something you should worry your little mind with. It's just a way to describe it, right? And at some point I remember very clearly saying to myself, thinking, now I'm doing this philosophy thing. It's like, a whole new world is opened up to me, right? And I'm going to go wherever the fuck this leads me, right? I'm going to be absolutely honest, as honest with myself as I possibly can, right? I'm not going to delude myself into any presuppositions or any kind of confirmation bias or anything. Sort of blank slate, get rid of all the bad apples and then start from there, right? Sort of mentality, right? And it's an ongoing project. I'm still doing this thing, right? I'm still trying to clarify after these sort of plus decade, a decade plus of thinking. I have reached a level where I have a treatise format, structure, size of my philosophy. I can write a book about my philosophy. There might be some areas that are slightly less strong than some other areas and so on, but it hangs together, right? In my opinion, right? I might find out that it doesn't and I have to work on it. So be it, right? But to the best of my understanding, I have a good picture, and I hope that it also comes across as you listen to these deconstructions that I have a structure. I can pinpoint when people try to poke holes in this kind. It's not like I'm defending, and not like Stefan Molyneux who's defending his own philosophy. Whatever the cost, right? It's like my philosophy is perfect, and anybody trying to challenge me is out to get me. Something. So that's sort of his paranoia, right? I would love people to come, have a debate with me and record something and illuminate me on stuff, right? Or just present their own philosophy and let's discuss it, right? And if I'm very emotional or emo, like what's it called, passionate in these kinds of deconstructions, it's because these are people who are more or less implicitly, more or less directly telling you they are the masters of philosophy and they're going to tell you how it is, right? And that sort of provokes me to some length, right? I'm as big a philosopher as anybody else. I don't care what kind of papers you have got, right? And I also just thought about this kind of academia, which is, okay, how do you know if some dude or girl, guys and dolls, some dolls says to you, I'm a PhD or I'm a philosopher. Then yeah, I could ask, well, how do you know? How do you know you're a philosopher? Is there something you can know? Okay, so if you can't know it, how do you get to the idea that you're a philosopher? So if you can know it, would you explain to me how you know it? Well, I went to this university and I was there for some years, and then I got a piece of paper where it says my name and PhD in philosophy. But that's not a philosopher. That's the piece of paper that says philosopher, right? Is that what it is? Just somebody, and those who are writing that paper, how do they know that they're philosophers? Well, because somebody else wrote a paper to them. Who wrote a paper to them? Who wrote a piece of paper to them? And so on, back in time. It's an infinite regression, right? Which is something philosophers shouldn't take seriously, right? So it's it fades out into nothing, right? So this fallacy that somebody else can tell you that you're a philosopher, which is the same as saying all those that they don't tell that they are philosophers, they're not philosophers. That's bullshit, right? In my opinion, good philosophy will never come from academia. Never. Never. Because they have no interest in, there are certain aspects that are sort of innocent, that way they can say whatever they want, but there are certain aspects where they can't go, because in the end, governments and the state and so on, right, that system, that sort of the violent built into the system that finances much of academia, it's not going to be challenged, right? Of course not. They won't bite the hand that feeds them. Of course not. So there's a good reason why in the last 100 years of welfare shit, right? And maybe you could even say 200 years, maybe, or 150 years, but at least 100 years, right? That there has been no good philosophy, because they are all sucking the tits of the state, basically, right? And they're obeying their masters. And they have, instead of becoming good philosophy, they have become gatekeepers of good, gatekeepers who keep good philosophy away from their corrupt philosophy, right? But they're too hung up in the academic, mind fuck in order to identify it. Or those who could identify it, they have been pushed out of the system long before they get to a point where they can do something like this Timothy Baynes guy, right? or Keith Frankie's or whoever, right? Okay, I thought that this is the start. There are 6 lectures, and it's about 6 hours long, almost 6 hours long, right? So it's going to be a long haul possibly, but you never know. Maybe um, maybe I will. 2 lectures will be enough. Who knows? Let's see how it goes, right? But I thought I might just do a little uh, research on the individual here, on Rodman Institute of Philosophy, Western, sounds like U.S. the U.S. Uh, research areas. This guy here, philosophy of mind, cognitive science, and consciousness, right? And I would say that philosophy of mind and cognitive science, they are contradictory. They can never get to work together, right? And maybe that's a takeaway already from this point on, that these people are working on unsoluble. They create a question. They find a question that can't be answered, and then they fight tooth and nail to be attached to this question in order to keep trying to answer it while it can't be answered, so they can have that professorship for as long as they want, basically, right? Okay, so apparently there's philosophy of mind, the cognitive science. I don't care too much about cognitive science. Honestly, I don't care about that, right? But I care about philosophy of mind and consciousness, and I'm sort of interested in here why it has been split. What is the difference between mind and consciousness? It might be fine, but I'm just sort of curious, why has it been split up in philosophy of mind, and maybe he should have said philosophy of consciousness, maybe, right? Okay. He's in the Department of Philosophy, Monash University. Okay, Monash. I suppose that's in the US, but I don't know. Biography. Tim Bayne is a philosopher of mind and cognitive science with a particular interest in the nature of consciousness. So consciousness is a subset of mind, apparently. Okay. One focus of current research concerns the measurement of, oh my God, the measurement of consciousness. Already here, right? He's suffering from naive realism, obviously. Otherwise, he would say, how the hell could you possibly measure consciousness? Because you need consciousness in order to read a measurement, right? It can never be done. It's circular. Okay. And the question of whether we can identify well-grounded ways of detecting consciousness in brain-damaged individuals. Well-grounded ways of detecting in brain damage. Why in brain damaged? Why not normal individuals? In infants and non-human animals? Well, why in particular these? I'm more interested in whether or not you can detect my consciousness, right? Brain damaged people are not really interested in whether or not you can measure their. Why? In infants, they don't care, and non-human animals, they certainly don't care, right? So he's interested in detecting consciousness in individuals and beings who don't care. Is this a red flag? A second focus of current research concerns the ways in which the structural features of consciousness, such as unity, I don't know what those structures are. Unity, I don't know what that refers to, can guide the search for a plausible account of its neural basis. Okay, so this is trying to connect the science and philosophy of. It's sort of sounds like scientism or a scientific materialist approach to metaphysics, in my opinion. A third focus of Tim's research concerns the notion of a level of consciousness. Notion of a level of consciousness. so sort of a degree of consciousness, something like that. Or whenever, I'm reminding myself and thereby also reminding you, right? Whenever things are set in a matter of degree, right? It cannot be knowledge. Because it's an appeal to a third party authority, right? It's like saying that you're a grown-up when you're 18 years old. Why? Why is exactly 18 rotations around the sun? Why does that make you a grown-up? No, but somebody has, why is it not 17 or 19 or 16 or 22 or whatever, right? Because somebody said there has to be a limit and it's here, right? It's completely arbitrary, right? It's because it's a matter of degree and it can't be knowledge, and therefore there's an appeal to somebody coming in and say, it's here, right? Whenever there's an appeal to a degree of something and an insight or settling on some kind of limitation, don't buy it, right? Knowledge of any kind can never be a matter of degree. It's like if you have bunch of, let's say, sugar crystals on your table, right? At what point is it a pile? If there are 2 sugar crystals, is it a pile? If there's 15, if there's 2,000, if there's 10,000, at what point is it a pile? Well, always or never, or whatever you want, right? Because it's a matter of degree. It's a matter of degree. You can't say when there's 6,255 crystals of this size, then there is a pile of sugar, right? It doesn't work that way. You can't get to knowledge that way, right? So, and you can extrapolate to all scenarios of where it's a matter of degree. I just beg you to think about it. It can never be knowledge. It has to be either or. And you have to experience it directly. Otherwise, it will always be an appeal. End up being an appeal to some authority getting in and just choosing some arbitrary thing and saying, this is how it is, right? And be very careful, because this kind of arbitration or arbitrary is maybe one of the reasons why we have a government, right? Because who's going to settle it, right? People don't want to agree upon it. What about those other, what if they don't agree over there? No, so we have to have one guy saying, this is how it is. And then everybody knows how it's supposed to be, because this magical guy or girl up there said this is how it is. 18 rotations around the sun, now you're a grown-up, right? Although the phrase is a common, the notion is, it must be is common, not is a common. The notion of a level of consciousness is obscure, and it is far from clear what a level of consciousness is meant to be. Okay, but why doesn't he tell us then, right? Tim is currently developing an account of levels of consciousness that attempts to do justice to the various ways in which the notion is employed in the science of consciousness. Tim also works on a number of issues in the philosophy of psychiatry, exploring questions relating to the etiology of delusions and the nature of psychiatry. I don't care about psychiatry, right? Etiology of delusions. I don't care about all these crazy people, right? I'm not bashing anybody, but I don't want my philosophy to be based on crazy people, right? Or dogs or anything like that, right? It's like with Bernardo Castro and there's a woman in Germany who was hit on the head, and then she told me she traveled past time and space, and she had a dream that another guy had a dream from another angle, and therefore I'm proving my thesis, right? Sort of, man. If you can't experience it yourself, there is no philosophy, because philosophy is personal, right? You can't say, yeah, I heard from somebody else that they reported to me, just like, Keith Frankis alluded to that, there are these reports. They're possibly based on qualia that are an illusion, but if it's in a report, apparently Frankis said, then it's fine. Then you have to take it seriously, right? Reporting is just an interpretation of qualia, right? And qualia that are interpreted cannot be a basis of philosophy, right? Because qualia are the foundations. So you can't let your qualia tell you how they should be understood, right? Okay. Let's see. I think there was some other the research here. Yeah. Okay. Research engages with a variety of. Let me see if I can get it on the screen there. Sorry if the screen I'm reading from doesn't match the screen on the video here. So you can possibly find it yourself, right? My research engages with a variety of issues that fall in the intersection of the philosophy of mind and the science of mind, just like I said in the previous slide, right? Predicted in the previous slide. One research focus concerns the epistemology of consciousness. Oh, you need consciousness, to the best of my understanding, to get to any idea of epistemology, right? So then you can't turn it around and use epistemology against consciousness, because that's what the foundation you work from in order to get to knowledge. It sounds very much like a circular argument or a violation of foundational philosophy, right? Here I am interested in the question of how robust measures of consciousness might be identified. I have been collaborating with Professor Nicholas Scheer, King's College London, to explore the projects of the natural kind approach for studying consciousness. I don't know the natural kind. The natural kind, okay, it says here. The natural kind approach treats consciousness as a natural kind and recommends that the search for objective measures of consciousness be modeled on the search for objective measures of other natural kinds, such as gold and hepatitis. What? The natural kind of... just taking it once again here, right? The natural kind approach treats consciousness as a natural kind and recommends that the search for objective measures of consciousness, you can't have that. What does it mean that it's objective, right? Now I know this is sort of a resume of it's just to get you an idea what the hell he's doing. This is not a dissertation, right? But again, this term objective that's just thrown in, right? Then it feels good. It feels like it's serious and it's scientific. It's objective. Oh, we are going for objectivity, right? But a measure cannot be objective. It can't. A measure in itself is nothing but just adding some. If you want to measure some object, right? Then you're bringing in some other object and comparing it to that first object. Why is that objective? If that object weren't objective in the first place, why would that particular object be so magical that when you bring that object along to that other object, that first object becomes objective? Or the comparison or the measurement or whatever it is going on there certainly becomes objective because of this magical instrument. It doesn't work this way, right? A measurement is not objective. It's subjective always, right? Because there's a subject that has to do the measurement. You can't just switch it over to call it objective out of nowhere, right? Okay, so I'm always, my hands are up, or my arms are up, my defenses are up, right? And this be modeled in the search for objective measures of other natural kinds, such as gold and hepatitis. So if you... This is just, this is a prime example of how corrupt, academia is, right? This will be a perpetual chase or search, right? They will keep spending money on searching for things they can't find, right? This is just a result of stupid, bad philosophy, right? They are not able to do good philosophy. That's why they're running around doing stuff that brings nobody anywhere except those who are running around doing it. They're making good money, but they're spending somebody else's hard-earned money, right? On something that doesn't produce anything and will never produce anything. Just this, but we just have to keep searching. And at some point, it will pop out of some instrument, right? Fuck off. Addressing the questions raised by the natural kind approach requires engaging with a number of issues in epistemology, metaphysics, and the philosophy of language. Addressing the question raised by the natural kind requires engaging with a number of issues. So they can bring in all the big guns and then, one big part, epistemology, metaphysics, philosophy, right? And also, why is epistemology placed before metaphysics? It's just like, I would say, metaphysics and then epistemology, because you need to do metaphysics in order to get to epistemology. This might just be, throwing in all the words they need to throw in to sound like they're doing some great stuff. But, just a little thing, right? Of particular relevance here are the questions about the epistemology of third-person access to consciousness should be related to the epistemology of first-person access to consciousness. Philosophers have traditionally taken first-person access to be privileged over third-person access, but the natural kind approach threatens to undermine this assumption. Well, good luck with that, man, right? There is only first-person access to consciousness. There is only the subjective, right? That you can stick some electrode on your own mind or somebody else's mind and then get some blemishes on a computer screen. That will never be consciousness. Because it's the computer screen now, right? Think that consciousness traveled through the electrodes and into the computer and then, consciousness on the screen. It can never work. There is only first person, subjective consciousness, right? Or mind experience, let's say consciousness, that's the term he uses, right? Good luck with that. This is a red flag for me, right? Okay, a second research focus concerns the ways in which the structural features of consciousness can guide the search for a plausible account of its neural basis. There's a neuroscience. It is a scientism on consciousness, right? It's this fetish with science can explain everything. In fact, science explains nothing. It explains nothing that a philosopher would be interested in explaining, right? Now, I'm not saying that philosophy can explain anything either. But philosophy then would be there to tell scientists, you can't explain anything with science, right? That should be the biggest purpose of a decent philosopher, is to tell scientists, no, you cannot explain any kind of foundational thinking using science, because you need foundational thinking in order to have any idea what you're doing when you're doing science. So you can't turn the camera backwards, right? It doesn't work. People like this should be defunded, right? And put in the streets and say, go out and do something creative, right? Then make some money, do some manual labor instead of this bullshit, right? Okay. A third research focus concerns the notion or level of consciousness. Although much of the science of consciousness is focused on the fine-grained contents of consciousness, it's like, how many ways can people find a new way or a new ism to approach this idea of consciousness, right? It's almost like every time there's a new guy or girl, watching a video or hearing a podcast or reading an article or whatever, that they have found a new approach to consciousness, right? How many ways can you approach that which you are the only one having direct access to? Oh, man. A fine-grained consciousness. It is increasingly clear that a full understanding of consciousness needs to reckon with the fact that consciousness can take the form of various levels. But although levels talk in now ubiquitous in consciousness, it has received little systematic analysis. well, I don't know where it's going with this. It's sort of us this. It seems like it reminisces for me the idea of slicing the problem into several problems, right? So that they can create a pet subject within a bigger subject, right? Just like Frankish does with illusionism. Yes, this qualia is, deeply focused on, and the rest of philosophy is just non-existent, right? So if you slice the problem up, then I'm going to look at either the slicing of the problem or a slice of the problem, right? And then bog themselves down into that trench there, right? This is not philosophy. This scientific, minute, detailed approach to a specific little topic, that's not good philosophy. You have to be general. You have to have the whole picture, right? You have to have everything. All of philosophy you need to handle. Otherwise, you're not a good philosopher, in my opinion, right? You're just what would that be? A nerd, maybe, right? Together with Professor Jack Honey and Adrian Owen, I am examining how the notion of a level of consciousness is understood in the science of consciousness and how theories of consciousness ought to accommodate the various levels of consciousness. I have also contributed to a number of debates in the philosophy of psychology, focusing in particular on the nature of etiology and delusion. Okay, so there are selected publications. We are not going into that. Okay, so that's the guy doing the lecture, Tim Bayne. Then there is Moscow Center for Consciousness Studies that hosts this lecture and also Frankish's lecture, right? And sort of the main research area: mind, body, problem, free will, moral responsibility, artificial intelligence, and personal identity. So, okay, so this is just a menu kind of thing here, right? But we have trust in science as a factor of political struggle. Oh man, this sounds like Dr. Fauci telling you to take your fucking boosters, right? Trust the science, right? You little people, you can't think for yourself. Just do as you're told by your masters. Then there's Tim Baynes' lecture course here. And we have podcast about philosophy, consciousness, Anton Kuznetsov. Okay. The fire of critical thinking. Sorry if my picture fills out the screen here. Let me see if I can. Yeah. If you think critically, then you are not thinking critically. Wow. If you think critically, you're not thinking critically. I mean, okay. We talk about the mysterious properties and consequences of critical thinking in this episode. So is this sounds like, no, you little people, don't think that you can think critically because you're not. We are creating this paradox. If you think you're critical, you're not critical. Oh man, get it off me, right? Then there's something about Aristotle and modern theories. It must be. There's a missing H there. They don't proofread their homepage. Of moral responsibility. There's another Aristotle and modern theories of moral responsibility. Right? There are two spelling errors in the headline here, right? Mr. A. Lunusov. Historical Philosophical Almanac. The 7th issue of the Historical Almanac was published. Okay. Okay, so we have punishment without crime. Is it possible to condemn for the plan? Long read. Is it possible to punish people for crimes that they have not yet committed? Implying that it's okay to punish people if they have committed some crime you think they have committed. Punishment is a sophist term for, torture, right? Punishment is a sophist term for torture. Just because somebody else has done something that you find immoral doesn't mean that you actually, or anybody, can actually go and punish them or torture them after they have done whatever you think is a crime. Why does that follow, right? Why does it follow that somebody can say, that's a crime, now I'm going to torture you, right? How does that follow, right? And these people are so embedded in this fallacy that they're saying, can we punish people without them even having done a crime? Yeah, Moscow Center for Consciousness Studies. Yeah, you're still communists or what? You have to put people in gulags or what? You might want to check up on your prior history since 1917, okay? God damn it, man. Schopenhauer in The Worst of Worlds. Arthur Schopenhauer is known as a pessimist, irrationalist, and misanthropist. He thought our world was the worst possible. In this episode of... Okay, whatever. Private and public. Private and public are not only two large spaces. Okay, what define a space? Okay? Large and space. Why is that philosophy? Nobody challenging private and public. What is that? Well, where are those spaces? Can I? Do they have a color? Do they have a sound? Whatever. Where are they? How do you get to them? Right? Exclusion from the public sphere is just as dangerous as the loss of privacy. So they are living in the statist mindset, right? Two of Wittgenstein and Moscow. Okay, yeah. Following the footsteps of a prior philosopher. Okay, so you have an idea where this Moscow Center for Consciousness Studies they come from, right? And I'm not particularly impressed, to be honest. Okay, so 37 minutes into it, let's start out to see what Timothy Baynes has to tell us.
On the problem of other minds. Hi, my name's Tim Bayne, and this is the first of a series of lectures on the problem of other minds that I'm going to be recording for the Moscow Center for Consciousness Studies. Over the course of these lectures, I'm going to provide you with a guide to what philosophers and scientists have said and are currently saying about our access to the inner lives and conscious states of other creatures. Not only the members of our own species, but also the members of other species. And we'll briefly touch on issues pertaining to the identification of consciousness in neural organoids and in artificial systems, such as IBM's Watson or Google's AlphaZero. My aim in this first lecture, this introductory lecture, is to develop a map of the terrain that we'll examine in subsequent lectures. I want to introduce you to some of the key concepts and to just raise some of the central questions that
So it will take 42 minutes to present a map of what we are going to discuss, right? So we are obviously deeply embedded in academia now, right? It took me 42 minutes to make one video presenting my metaphysics and then presenting what that means for my epistemology, my objectivity, and my ethics, right? About 45 minutes it took me to do the whole thing. It takes him 42 minutes just to present a landscape of what the problems of other minds are, right? I'm not saying that mine is perfect. It might be too short. Maybe a little too short, right? There might be something I might want to change at some point. Okay, but it's close enough for rock and roll, right? This reeks of make work. This reeks of I have to make it long-winded in order for it to sound like I know something, right? If it's too short, people won't take it seriously. So it has to be long-winded. Otherwise, it's not academic. And otherwise, Keith Frankich and Daniel Dennett and all the other guys, they won't like me because they think I'm not academic enough for their level or something like that, right? So they all suck up to this kind of way of doing things that if you're putting it out here to everybody, right? You have to, in my opinion, gear it towards where people are coming from, right? And they're not coming from academia, I promise you. Maybe somebody are. Some of them are because this is the avenue into it from academia. But YouTube is not an academic channel as such, right? So this is for the everyman, so to say, right? Guys like me, right? Who can think for themselves, right? Who are not academic, who does not have an academic career that they need to take care of, right? And need to protect. So I can say what the fuck I want, right? I don't have a director of the university, or whatever they're called, the king of the university, where I need to bow down to some kind of mantras there, right? So I could be completely open about my philosophy in this sense. So, just my thoughts.
We'll be addressing. I won't be considering many answers to these questions. That's the task for later lectures. I should also note that a lot of what I'm going to say in this lecture is based on material that's found in chapter 11 of my book, Philosophy of Mind and Introduction, published by Routledge in 2022. I've called this series of lectures The Problems of Other Minds rather than The Problem of Other Minds, because I want to emphasize the fact that there are a number of problems pertaining to our knowledge of other conscious minds. And what I'm going to do in this lecture is identify 4 of the central problems and try and say a little bit about how they're connected to each other. The first problem concerns how we actually go about ascribing mental states, and in particular conscious states, to other agents. There is, of course, a parallel question about how we...
Okay, already here, why do I need to describe it to other agents, right? What is an agent? Is that another individual, another human being, or something, some entity outside myself that I consider similar to myself, that has the same abilities and so on? Why do I need to tell somebody? Why do I need to report anything? Why can't I sit alone on an island and philosophize about it, right? Why do I have to describe it to somebody? What is this fetish with describing? Is this a weakness of the whole academic idea that you have to tell somebody about it? Philosophy is something you can do alone. In fact, you should do it alone, right? You shouldn't wait for somebody to report to you how you're thinking and what is going on inside you, right? You have to do it by yourself, right? So this, maybe I want to hear it once more, right? Why does he say that?
The first problem concerns how we actually go about ascribing mental states, and in particular conscious states, to other agents. There is, of course, a parallel question about how we go about ascribing mental states.
Oh, okay. He said ascribing, not describing. I heard it as describing. Okay, sorry about that. But why would I ascribe it to somebody else? Right? Why would I need to do that? I have my own experience, right? Why do I need to ascribe? And ascribing, is that the same as saying I'm just creating an axiom that says everybody that I consider of the same kind as myself has a mind similar to my own, right? That's just an axiom, done. So we don't need any lecture, right? It's so simple, man, right? I don't need to have any measurements. I can just say, I'm going to treat this over there as some entity that is similar to myself, that has the same abilities and experiences. Maybe not exactly the same, but of the same potential, right? They can also, that individual there, called an individual, can also experience that elephant, right? So we can agree upon that elephant, right? I can never stick any measurement on them in order to get to a point where I say, aha, there it is. There is a similar kind of consciousness in there that is similar to mine, because I can't even experience my own consciousness, right? From the outside. So why should I experience somebody else's outside, right? Well, how do we go about ascribing conscious states to other entities? Why would I want to do that? I mean, in the sense that we can do it, I can do it axiomatically, then I'm going to do that. I can never experience it, because my experience is particular to me, right? And if I'm saying my experience is some kind of, at least to some extent, a representation or something outside my experience, I still only have my own experience of it. I don't have that outside. If I say some part of my experience is a representation of the outside, then I only have the representation. So whatever I do as something I consider an outside will merely be a representation of it inside my consciousness or my mind, right? And he also says the psychological problem of the minds. How do we go about ascribing conscious states to other entities? Now he's sort of the problem of the minds. How do we go about ascribing consciousness states to other entities? He doesn't mention mind in how do we go about ascribing conscious states to other entities. There's not a mention of mind, right? So if it's a problem of the mind, the term mind has to be a part of the description of that problem. But it isn't. There's not mind mentioned. Ascribing conscious states to entities. Well, what is the connection between the term mind and conscious states, right?
To ourselves, how we know what experiences we're currently having.
It's sort of a lazy way. He's just brainstorming onto paper here or onto a PowerPoint, right? Without clarifying I mean, if you're discussing something loosely on the fly, okay, then the terms are used arbitrarily sometimes, right? But in this case, where we have a very good amount of time to sit down and ponder about every term used, then you are not connecting the dots correctly, right? The psychological problem of the minds. Okay. What is that problem? Well, it's the minds that is the problem, right? And the description of that problem is how do you go about ascribing conscious states to other entities? There's no reference to mind in that, right? Lazy.
And that's called the problem of self-knowledge. I'm going to leave the problem of self-knowledge to one side here, but I just want to note in passing that there are lots of deep and difficult but important questions about how the problem of self-knowledge and the problem of other minds are related.
Now, why are you not dealing with that? Why? What do you mean by self-knowledge? I'm concerned about the use of the term knowledge in what I would consider metaphysics, right? As I've said a lot of times in all the deconstruction and so on, philosophers just throw in the term truth and knowledge and so on, objectivity, into thinkings of within metaphysics. But knowledge is a particular term used within the philosophy called epistemology. And in my opinion, you need to have settled all your metaphysics before you even attempt to start on epistemology, right? So, self-knowledge is sort of a misnomer because you can't know yourself. Knowing is about external world, right? So it should be called something else. And I know there's limitations to language and so on, and the language we use in everyday is not particularly well suited for clarifying metaphysical stuff. So I'll give him that. But why is it not important to first have an idea of self-knowledge, if that's how you understand how you work, before you start telling everybody else how they work? Shouldn't you, check yourself before you wreck somebody else, right? Before you wreck yourself. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Shouldn't you check yourself, right? Socrates, right? Think about your own, how you approach philosophy. Have a philosophy before you tell everybody else about philosophy, right? So shouldn't it, first of all, I have to tell you everything about this self-knowledge before I can even attempt to ascribe any kind of mind to somebody else, right? No, I'm an academic. I don't need to do that. I can do what the fuck I want, right?
Returning to our knowledge of other conscious agents, we're pretty sure that some...
Knowledge of other... what do you mean? The agent. Conscious agent. But if it's the agent is not the consciousness, right? Just because there's somebody moving around that you consider similar to yourself as an entity or whatever, right? Doesn't mean that they're conscious. That's the problem. Aren't you begging the question here? I just said you're talking as if it's the case, and then later you're going to tell me it is the case. It sounds begging the question, like begging the question. This, right? It's awfully close, right?
Some entities, our fellow human beings, dogs, cats, for example, are conscious. And we're pretty sure that many entities, bricks, chairs...
Pretty sure is not something I like in my philosophy, right? You can stuff your pretty sure up your butthole, to be honest, right? Don't give me a fucking pretty sure, right? And this we are pretty sure. Who are those we? Everybody in Moscow or what? Right? 2 million people in Moscow agree. Are pretty sure, right? Who are those we? Speak for yourself and your self-knowledge, right? Speak from your self-knowledge and say, you could say, I am pretty sure that... No. It has to, you have to accommodate. You have to create this community of people that are sort of a fluffy boundary of who knows who those we are. As if it sounds more intimidating to say, we are pretty sure. Like, it's like, okay, so I can't be sure because there are all those we out there that are pretty sure, so I have to buy this because he says they are pretty sure. Fuck off, man. Give me something I can handle in my own experience, right? Don't tell me somebody out there is pretty sure. Fuck off, man.
Tables, typewriters, for example, don't have the capacity for consciousness. But there are a lot...
How do we get to that? How do you get to that? I'm not saying they have, but how do you get to say they don't have? Because you need to experience something out there in that world you don't have access to in order to tell me that there's something that isn't there. And when you look away, maybe it just left whatever you looked at. So you say, oh, there's no consciousness there. Then you turn around and then the consciousness comes back to it. How the hell do you get to it? You can't, right? It's just your weird presuppositions or preconceived ideas of how the world works. This doesn't bode well for this lecture series, to be honest, man. I'm already... Oh, man.
Lots of entities, birds, fish, insects, maybe very young children, that we're unsure about when it comes to consciousness, and about which there's significant...
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself. Don't say we, right? I don't like sort of an anonymous number of people. I don't know. Who are they? Who are those we, right? And why do you need to bring in some anonymous people who apparently are thinking the same way that you are? Why are you not just saying, I am, or I am thinking, or I have this idea, or this is my philosophy? Why don't you do that, right? It's because you don't have the strong will enough to say that. Is it not authoritative enough if you say, I have this, right? Then you feel that people can come back to you and say, yeah, but that's just your opinion, right? If you say, we are ascribing, then people can't attack you because then they need to attack all those anonymous we out there that you're referring to also, right? This is a sophist trick, in my opinion.
Debate. Just as there's uncertainty about the distribution of consciousness in the animal kingdom, there's also uncertainty about the distribution of consciousness amongst human beings. And
now I might just, pick this apart again, right? Uncertainty, that's an appeal to certainty. Now, certainty is a kind of knowledge, right? It's a particularly glorified kind of knowledge. Now, you can't appeal to knowledge within metaphysics, right? And if you're not doing metaphysics, what are you doing here? Because don't you need to settle some kind of metaphysics before you can start to tell people about other people's experiences, right? You need to settle your own experience because that's what you're using to tell me about other people's experiences. And if that's what you call self-knowledge, don't you need to do some metaphysics and present your metaphysics here before you can do this? So this midstream kind of philosophy, it sucks.
Later lectures, we're also going to look at some of those debates. I'm going to use the phrase the psychological problem of other minds, or sometimes just the psychological problem, to refer to the question of what it is that drives our various descriptions of consciousness. Why exactly are we willing to ascribe consciousness to, say, dogs, but not?
Who are those we? I'm not prepared to do it, right? Don't tell me what I'm prepared to do. Then you can say, no, but it doesn't concern you. That we is not you, Mr. Manibil. But how would I know? You didn't say. The we I'm referring to is everybody except Manibil, right? Oh man, these academics, man. God damn it, those parasites, right?
Bees. Why do we think that our fellow adult human beings are conscious, but many of us have doubts about very, very young infants, or perhaps the fetus in late stages of gestation? I'm going to call this the psychological problem because it's first and foremost a question about our minds actually work. If you like, it's akin to the question of how we are able to recognize people, how we're able to navigate from one side of a city to the other, how we're able to produce and understand language. There is a great deal of work relating to our capacity to ascribe mental states to other people, that is, mental states more generally. This is called the mind reading or mentalizing.
We are able to ascribe, yeah, linguistically, right? But lingo doesn't necessitate that what the lingo refers to is going on. Just because you can say, I'm ascribing something to you, doesn't mean that automatically there's something there that is being ascribed. Words are just words. Words are just sounds you make, right? And that you have an inherent understanding what these sounds are supposed to mean. That's on you, right? That doesn't mean just because I say elephant doesn't mean that there's an elephant somewhere here, right? Just because I'm ascribing, mental stuff to my laptop here, doesn't mean that there's some mental stuff there, right? So this is already, oh my God, right?
Our mind reading or mentalizing capacities. But it's not clear how much of that work speaks directly to the mechanisms that are involved in ascribing subjective experience to a creature. Arguably,
subscribing subjective experience. Oh man. This will probably also be a long haul. Maybe even more problematic than. At least he's clearer in his speech than Keith Frank is. I'll give him that, right? But the philosophy here doesn't sound too good, right? Okay, suffer from a lot of the same problems that a guy like Keith Frank is, right? This is the naive realism scientific approach to consciousness. It'll never work, right? All these people doing this should be defunded immediately, in my opinion, right? Right, and then if you have some good philosophy, go out and do it, right? Do it in your spare time, like I'm doing, right? I could do a lecture series from my home. Why do I need to sit with other academics and siphon off taxpayer money in order to do this, right? It's what's it called? It's a coincidence of no, what's it called? It's conflict of interest, right? It's you can't both serve philosophy and serve a master, right? You can't both serve good philosophy and somebody paying you money. You will always end up looking at what do they want, those who give me money, right? Whether that be the free market or taxpayer money, so to say, right? You will be looking more about if that's what you need to do to keep yourself alive or going without having to resort to manual labor like the rest of us, right? Then you will not bite the hand that feeds you, right? So you will, whatever they have got going of mantras and so on, you will support that, or you will shut up at least, right? To keep the money flow going, right? So you will sell your soul to the system rather than to philosophy, right? That's the problem. Okay, almost at 1 hour here. Share, like, and subscribe, please. Otherwise, have a nice day. Have a nice Christmas. See you next time.